The dust from the stagecoach hadn't yet settled when Eliza Morgan stepped onto the wooden boardwalk of Redemption, Texas, her hand instinctively moving to protect the small swell beneath her worn traveling dress. Knowing that this God-forsaken town in the summer of 1876 was her last chance at disappearing before anyone discovered the truth she carried. The July heat pressed down like a physical weight, making the air shimmer above the dirt road that served as Redemption's main street. Eliza's dark hair clung to her neck, damp with perspiration, and her green eyes scanned the unfamiliar buildings with a mixture of hope and desperation. She had exactly $12 to her name, a carpetbag containing everything she owned, and approximately 4 months before her condition would become impossible to hide. Back in St. Louis, she had been a schoolteacher with a respectable reputation. Then Marcus Whitfield had arrived, all charm and empty promises, sweeping her into a whirlwind courtship that had ended with him vanishing the moment she'd told him about the baby. His family's money had bought his escape, and her shame had bought her a one-way ticket to Texas. The Dusty Rose Saloon stood across the street, its painted sign faded by the relentless sun. Next to it, a general store promised supplies, and further down, she could see what looked like a boarding house. Eliza adjusted her bonnet and crossed the street, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. She needed work, and she needed lodging, and she needed both before nightfall. The boarding house door opened before she could knock, revealing a stout woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were sharp but not unkind as they took in Eliza's appearance. "You looking for a room?" The woman asked, her voice carrying the rough edges of someone who had lived hard years. "Yes, ma'am," Eliza replied, trying to keep her voice steady, "and possibly work if you know of any available in town." The woman's gaze lingered on Eliza's face, reading something there that made her expression soften just slightly. "Name's Martha Hendricks. I run this place. Got a room on the second floor, costs $4 a week, includes breakfast and supper." As for work, the schoolhouse lost its teacher last month when Miss Peterson married and moved to Austin. Town council's been looking for a replacement. Hope flickered in Eliza's chest. Teaching was the one thing she knew she could do well. "Is there someone I should speak with about the position?" "Mayor Bradshaw keeps an office above the general store. You'll find him there most afternoons." Martha stepped back, holding the door open. "Come on in out of this heat. You look about ready to fall over." The boarding house interior was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and sturdy furniture that had seen better days but was well maintained. Martha led her up a narrow staircase to a small room containing a bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. "I'll need the first week's payment now," Martha said, not unkindly. "House rules are simple. No men in the rooms, no drinking, no causing trouble. Breakfast is at 7, supper at 6. You miss it, you miss it." Eliza counted out $4 precious from her dwindling funds and handed them over. "Thank you, Mrs. Hendricks. It's Miss Hendricks, but everyone calls me Martha." The older woman pocketed the money and studied Eliza again with those perceptive eyes. "You running from something or towards something?" The directness of the question caught Eliza off guard. "Does it matter?" "Not to me, but small towns talk and secrets have a way of coming out. Better to be honest from the start, I've always found." Martha moved toward the door, then paused. "The pump's out back if you want to wash up. Mayor should be in his office for another hour or so." After Martha left, Eliza sank onto the bed, allowing herself exactly 5 minutes of weakness. Her hand moved to her stomach again, to the barely there curve that would soon become undeniable. She thought of Marcus, of his smooth lies and practiced seductions, and felt anger surge through her exhaustion. He had stolen her future in St. Louis, but he wouldn't steal her future entirely. She would make a life here somehow, for herself and for this baby. 20 minutes later, having washed away the worst of the travel dust and changed into her least wrinkled dress, Eliza made her way to the general store. The interior was dim and blessedly cool, smelling of leather and tobacco and coffee. A thin man with spectacles directed her to a staircase at the back, and she climbed to find a door marked with a hand-painted sign reading Mayor's Office. She knocked, and a voice called for her to enter. Mayor Bradshaw was a portly man in his 60s with mutton-chop sideburns and a waistcoat that strained across his belly. He looked up from a ledger as she entered, his expression shifting from mild annoyance at the interruption to interest as he took in her appearance. "Help you, miss." "Miss Morgan," Eliza said, straightening her spine and calling on every ounce of confidence she could muster. "I understand you're in need of a schoolteacher. I've come to apply for the position." Bradshaw leaned back in his chair, which creaked alarmingly under his weight. "That's so." "What are your qualifications?" "I taught for 3 years at the Riverside School for Girls in St. Louis. I'm proficient in reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography. I can provide references from my former employer." This last part was a lie, as asking for references would have required explanations she couldn't give, but she spoke with such assurance that the mayor didn't question it. "St. Louis, a long way from home. What brings you to Redemption?" Eliza had prepared for this question during the long stagecoach journey. "I wanted a change of scenery, Mayor. The city was becoming tiresome, and I've always been drawn to the frontier. I heard there were opportunities in Texas for those willing to work hard." It was just plausible enough to be believable, especially for a man who likely didn't care too much about the particulars as long as his town's children had someone to educate them. Bradshaw stroked his sideburns thoughtfully. "Position pays $20 a month, plus you'd have use of the teacher's cottage behind the schoolhouse. It's nothing fancy, but it's sound and private. School term runs September through May, 6 days a week. You'd have about 20 students, ages 6 to 14, all levels." "Think you can handle that?" $20 a month wasn't much, but combined with free lodging, it would be enough to survive. More importantly, a private cottage meant she wouldn't be under Martha's watchful eye when her pregnancy became obvious. "Yes, sir, I can handle it." "Well, Miss Morgan, you're hired. Term doesn't start for another 6 weeks, but you can move into the cottage anytime. Stop by tomorrow and I'll give you the key and show you the schoolhouse." Eliza felt dizzy with relief. "Thank you, Mayor Bradshaw. You won't regret this." As she descended the stairs back into the general store, she nearly collided with a tall figure coming through the front door. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her, and she looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. "Whoa there, ma'am. You all right?" The man was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and dark blonde hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore the dusty clothes of a working cowboy, worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a bandana around his neck. A Stetson hat dangled from one hand, and his face carried the kind of honest openness that made him immediately likable. He was also, Eliza couldn't help but notice, remarkably handsome. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, stepping back quickly. "I apologize for my clumsiness. No harm done." His smile was easy and genuine, reaching those startling blue eyes. "You must be new in town. I'm Cole Brennan. I work at the Double R Ranch just south of here." "Eliza Morgan. I've just arrived today." "Well, Miss Morgan, welcome to Redemption. It's not much to look at, but the people are decent, for the most part." He shifted his weight, seeming reluctant to end the conversation. "If you need anything, or if anyone gives you trouble, you can find me at the ranch or in town most Saturday nights." Something in his earnest expression made Eliza's throat tight. She wasn't used to genuine kindness, not after the way Marcus's friends had turned away from her once the scandal started to break. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Brennan. Cole, please." He tipped his head politely. "I should let you get on with your business, but I hope I'll see you around town, Miss Morgan." "Eliza," she found herself saying, then immediately regretted it. She shouldn't be making friends, shouldn't be drawing attention. She needed to keep to herself until she figured out how to navigate her situation. But Cole's smile widened at her permission to use her first name, and something warm flickered in her chest despite her better judgment. He settled his hat back on his head and moved past her into the store, and Eliza continued out into the blazing afternoon heat, her thoughts in unexpected turmoil. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Eliza moved into the teacher's cottage, a simple two-room structure that was indeed nothing fancy but was clean and sturdy. She spent her days preparing lesson plans and organizing the schoolhouse, which had fallen into some disarray during its vacancy. The work kept her busy and kept her from dwelling too much on her circumstances. She saw Cole Brennan occasionally in town, and each time he would tip his hat and exchange a few words with her. He never pressed for more conversation than she seemed willing to give, but his presence became something she found herself looking for without quite meaning to. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt since before Marcus had destroyed her life. Her pregnancy progressed, and while she was still able to hide it beneath her dresses, she knew time was running short. She had perhaps 2 months before it would become obvious, and then the questions would start. The thought kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling of her cottage and wondering if she would have to run again. It was a Saturday evening in late August when everything changed. Eliza had gone to the general store for supplies, and as she left with her purchases, she saw a commotion down the street. A crowd had gathered near the saloon, and she could hear raised voices. Her instinct was to return to her cottage and avoid whatever trouble was brewing, but then she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. "I'm telling you, I'm looking for a woman named Eliza Morgan. Dark hair, green eyes, about this tall. She would have arrived here sometime in the last couple months." Marcus Whitfield's smooth, educated voice carried down the street, and Eliza's heart began to race. She dropped her packages and pressed herself against the side of the general store, her mind spinning. He had found her. Somehow he had tracked her to redemption. But why? He had made it abundantly clear that he wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. "Don't know anyone by that name," she heard someone respond. "And even if we did, what business is it of yours?" "She's my fiancée," Marcus said, his voice taking on a tone of injured dignity that Eliza recognized as complete fabrication. "We had a misunderstanding and she ran off. Her family is worried sick. I've been searching for her for weeks." Eliza's hands shook as she peered around the corner. Marcus stood in the center of the crowd, looking every inch the concerned gentleman in his expensive suit and polished boots. He was out of place in Redemption's dust and roughness, but he wielded his cultured appearance like a weapon, making himself seem like the reasonable party. "That's a lie." The words were out of Eliza's mouth before she could stop them. She stepped away from the building, her anger overwhelming her fear. Marcus's head snapped toward her, and his expression shifted through surprise, triumph, and then a mask of tender concern so quickly she almost doubted she'd seen the first two. "Eliza, darling," he said, moving toward her with his hands outstretched. "Thank God I found you. Your mother has been beside herself with worry." "Don't you dare," Eliza said, her voice shaking with fury. "Don't you dare stand there and lie. You know exactly why I left St. Louis, and it had nothing to do with a misunderstanding." Marcus's eyes narrowed, and she saw the calculation there. "Darling, you're not well. Let me take you home where you can be cared for properly." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Eliza stood her ground, even though she could feel the eyes of half the town on them. This was exactly what she had wanted to avoid, exactly the kind of attention that would ruin everything, but she couldn't let Marcus spin his lies unchallenged. "Now see here," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "You're my responsibility, and I've come a long way to bring you home." "Don't make a scene." "She said she's not going with you." Cole Brennan's voice cut through the tension, and Eliza turned to see him shouldering through the crowd. He positioned himself between her and Marcus, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard. "Seems to me the lady's made herself clear." Marcus looked Cole up and down with barely concealed disdain. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy. This is a private family matter." "Funny thing about that," Cole said evenly. "Eliza just said you were lying." So either you're her fiancé and she's telling the truth about why she left, which means you're no good and she's right not to go with you, or you're lying about being her fiancé, which means you've got no claim on her at all. Either way, she stays here. You know who I am. Marcus's cultivated accent became more pronounced, a sure sign that his temper was rising. My family has connections throughout this state. I could make serious trouble for you and this pathetic little town. Could be, Cole agreed, his tone still calm but his hands hanging loose at his sides in a way that suggested he was ready for trouble. But seems to me you're the one who's going to have trouble if you don't get on your horse and ride back to wherever you came from. Several other men had moved closer now, forming a loose circle that clearly sided with Cole. Marcus looked around, seeming to realize that his usual tactics weren't going to work here. His gaze found Eliza again, and there was something cold and ugly in his expression. You're making a mistake, Eliza. You think these people will accept you when they find out the truth. You think they'll want their children taught by a woman like you. He practically spat the last words, making sure his voice carried. You're carrying my bastard, and everyone will know soon enough. Then you'll be begging me to take you back. The silence that followed was absolute. Eliza felt the weight of every stare, felt her face burn with humiliation. All her efforts to start over, to build a respectable life here, destroyed in a single sentence. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her legs wouldn't move. That true? Cole asked quietly, turning to look at her. Eliza lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed even as her world crumbled around her. Yes, I'm with child. He got me with promises of marriage, then disappeared the moment I told him. I came here to start over, to make a life for myself and my baby away from the scandal. Now you all know, and I suppose I'll have to move on again. You're not going anywhere. Cole's words were firm, and she stared at him in confusion. He turned back to Marcus, his expression dangerous now. You heard the lady. You lied to her, you abandoned her, and now you come here throwing around threats and insults. I think it's time you left, friend, before my patience runs out. She's carrying my child, Marcus said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. You gave up any right to that child when you ran off, Cole said. And you're about 5 seconds away from getting knocked into next week if you don't start moving. Marcus looked around again, seeing no allies in the crowd. His face twisted with anger, but he was smart enough to recognize when he was beaten. You deserve each other, he sneered. A fallen woman and a dirt-poor cowboy, I hope you enjoy your pathetic life. He turned and stalked toward a horse tied near the saloon, mounting with jerky, furious movements. Within moments, he was galloping out of town, dust rising in his wake. The crowd began to disperse, some people murmuring to each other, others avoiding Eliza's eyes. She felt hollow, exhausted, and terrified of what came next. Cole stood in front of her, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, Eliza said softly. You didn't need to get involved. I've brought nothing but trouble. Don't apologize for his actions. Cole's voice was gentle now. You got nothing to be ashamed of. The whole town knows now. I'll lose my teaching position before I even start. Mayor Bradshaw will never allow a woman in my condition to teach the children. Cole was quiet for a moment, then said something that changed everything. What if you weren't in that condition by the time school started? Eliza blinked at him in confusion. I don't understand. What if you were married? A married woman expecting a child, that's different then? He trailed off, then took a breath and met her eyes directly. Marry me, Eliza, she stared at him, certain she had misheard. What, marry me? He repeated, more firmly this time. We'll tell people we've been courting quietly, that we got married quick because of the baby. Won't be the first time that's happened, and folks are more forgiving when there's a wedding ring involved. You can't be serious. You barely know me. Why would you do this? Cole's blue eyes were steady on hers. Because it's the right thing to do. Because that bastard doesn't deserve to ruin your life. Because you're trying to make an honest living and provide for your child, and I respect that. He paused, then added more quietly, and because I'd like to get to know you better if you'll let me. Eliza's throat felt tight. I can't ask you to do this. It wouldn't be fair to you. You'd be saddled with another man's child with a woman who can't offer you anything. You're not asking. I'm offering. Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. I'm not going to lie and say I've been pining after you or some romantic notion like that, but I know you're a good woman who got dealt a bad hand. And I know that every time I've seen you these past weeks, I've wanted to know more about you. Maybe we can build something real out of that. Maybe we can't. But either way, you and your baby would have a name and a home, and that's something. This is insane, Eliza whispered, but she didn't pull her hand away. Maybe, Cole agreed with a small smile. But the West is full of insane things that worked out just fine. What do you say, Eliza? Will you marry me? She thought of Marcus riding away, of the whispers that would follow her if she remained unmarried, of the terrifying prospect of raising a child alone with no money and no prospects. She thought of Cole's steady presence these past weeks, of his kindness just now in defending her. She thought of those blue eyes and that honest smile, and she thought that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes, I'll marry you. Cole's smile widened into a grin. Then let's go find the preacher before you change your mind. They were married that very evening in the small church at the edge of town, with Martha Hendricks and the general store owner serving as witnesses. The preacher, a grizzled man named Reverend Jacobs, asked no questions and offered simple blessings. When Cole slipped a plain gold band onto Eliza's finger, she felt the surreal quality of the moment wash over her. 6 hours ago, she had been a disgraced woman about to lose everything. Now she was Mrs. Cole Brennan, and the man beside her was promising to love and cherish her, for better or worse. After the ceremony, Cole walked her back to the teacher's cottage. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the evening air was finally cooling from the day's brutal heat. I should probably explain the practical arrangements, Cole said as they reached her door. I live in the bunkhouse at the ranch with the other hands. It's no place for a married woman. You should stay here in the cottage, keep your teaching position. I'll come into town when I can, and people will think we're just giving you space because of your condition. Eliza looked at him in surprise. You're not expecting to, that is, you don't plan to, consummate the marriage, Cole said frankly, and she felt her cheeks heat. Not unless and until you want to, Eliza. I meant what I said. I'm doing this because it's right, and because I'd like to see where things go between us. But I'm not going to force myself on you. You've got enough to deal with without worrying about that. The relief that flooded through her was so intense she felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she managed, for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't owe me anything. Cole reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender it made her heart ache. Get some rest. I'll come by tomorrow and we can talk more, figure out how we want to handle things going forward. He tipped his hat to her and walked away into the gathering darkness, leaving Eliza standing in her doorway with a gold ring on her finger, and a sense that her entire life had just taken a turn she never could have anticipated. The next few weeks were strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Cole came to visit her every evening after his work at the ranch was done, and they would sit on the small porch of the cottage and talk. At first, the conversations were careful, both of them dancing around the unusual nature of their arrangement. But gradually, they began to relax with each other. Cole told her about growing up on a small farm in Oklahoma, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16 and making his way to Texas to find work. He spoke of the Double R Ranch where he worked, of the owner, Mr. Richardson, who was a fair man, of the other ranch hands who had become like brothers to him. He talked about his dreams of someday having his own piece of land, of raising cattle and horses and building something that was his. In turn, Eliza told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about her love of teaching, about the books she had read and the places she dreamed of seeing. She didn't talk much about Marcus. But one evening she found herself telling Cole the whole sordid story, how she had believed every word Marcus said, how she had given herself to him thinking they were to be married, how completely he had deceived her. "I was so naive," she said, staring out at the darkening street. "I thought I was sophisticated, thought I understood the world. I was a fool." "You trusted someone you loved," Cole said quietly. "That's not foolish, that's brave. He's the one who should be ashamed, not you." The simple statement made something inside Eliza crack open. She had been carrying so much shame, so much self-blame, that it hadn't occurred to her that she might not deserve it. She turned to look at Cole, really look at him, and saw only sincerity in his expression. "How are you real?" She asked softly. "How are you this kind?" Cole looked almost embarrassed. "I'm not special, Eliza. I'm just a man trying to do right. My mama raised me to respect women, to keep my word, to help where I can. Nothing more complicated than that." But it was complicated, Eliza thought. It was complicated because she was starting to develop feelings for this man who had married her out of obligation. It was complicated because sometimes when he smiled at her, she felt butterflies in her stomach. It was complicated because she was carrying another man's child and had no right to wish that Cole would kiss her the way he sometimes seemed to want to. As September arrived and the school term began, Eliza threw herself into teaching. Her students ranged from 6-year-old twins who could barely write their names to a 14-year-old boy who was already as tall as a man and clearly resented being kept in school when he could be working. She loved the challenge of it, loved seeing their faces light up when they mastered something new. The town's reaction to her marriage was mixed. Some people seemed to accept the story that she and Cole had been courting quietly and had married quickly. Others clearly suspected the truth, but kept their opinions to themselves, at least in her presence. There were a few, like Mrs. Bradshaw, the mayor's wife, who made their disapproval known through cold looks and cutting remarks. But Eliza found she could bear it as long as she had her teaching and her cottage and Cole's visits. Her pregnancy became more obvious as the weeks passed, and she found herself both excited and frightened about the baby. This child had been conceived in lies, but she loved it already, fiercely and protectively. She felt it move for the first time in mid-October, a flutter like butterfly wings against her ribs, and she immediately wanted to tell Cole. He came by that evening as usual, and she grabbed his hand the moment he stepped onto the porch. "Feel this," she said, placing his palm against the swell of her stomach. Cole froze, his eyes wide. "Eliza, I don't think—" "Just wait," she said, holding his hand in place. "Just wait." They stood there in the fading light, Cole's hand warm against her belly through the fabric of her dress, both of them barely breathing. And then it happened again, that little flutter, stronger this time. Was that? Cole's voice was filled with wonder. "The baby," Eliza confirmed, smiling up at him. That was the baby moving. Cole's expression was awestruck. He looked down at where his hand rested, then back up at her face, and something shifted between them in that moment. The baby became real to both of them, not just an abstract future event, but a living person they would both love and raise. "Hello, little one," Cole said softly to her stomach. "I'm Cole. I guess I'm going to be your daddy." Eliza felt tears slip down her cheeks. She had been so afraid that Cole would resent the baby, that he would see it as a burden or a constant reminder that she had been with another man. But the tenderness in his voice, the gentle way he kept his hand on her belly as if protecting the child within, told her that her fears were unfounded. "You're going to be a wonderful father," she whispered. Cole looked at her, and the emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "And you're going to be an amazing mother." He pulled his hand back slowly, as if reluctant to break the contact, and they sat down in their usual spots on the porch. But something had changed. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. "Eliza," Cole began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "I need to tell you something. This arrangement, this marriage, it was supposed to be just practical. A way to give you and the baby protection and respectability. but somewhere along the way it became more than that for me. Eliza's heart began to pound. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you." The words came out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back for weeks. "I love the way you talk about your students, the way you get excited about teaching them something new. I love how you're facing everything with such courage even though you're scared. I love your laugh and your smile and the way you bite your lip when you're thinking hard about something. I love all of it, and I needed you to know." Eliza couldn't breathe. "Cole, you don't have to say anything back," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know you're still healing from what that bastard did to you. I just wanted to be honest because I'm tired of pretending this is just a business arrangement for me. You're my wife, Eliza, and I'd like the chance to be a real husband to you if you'll have me." For a long moment, Eliza couldn't speak. Her mind was whirling, her heart racing. She thought about the past 3 months, about Cole's steady presence and gentle kindness. She thought about how she looked forward to his visits, how empty the cottage felt when he left. She thought about the way her stomach flipped when he smiled at her, and how right it had felt to have his hand on her belly feeling their baby move. Their baby. Because somewhere along the way, she had started thinking of it that way too. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said finally, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I didn't want to. I was so afraid of being hurt again, of trusting someone who would let me down. But you've shown me every single day that you're nothing like Marcus. You're honest and kind and good, and I can't help but love you for it." Cole's face transformed with joy. "Really, you mean it?" "Yes," Eliza said, laughing through her tears. "I mean it." He stood up and pulled her gently to her feet, his hands settling on her waist. "Can I kiss you?" "I've been wanting to for weeks, but I didn't want to pressure you." "Please," Eliza breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning each other. Then Cole's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheek, and the kiss deepened into something that made Eliza's knees weak. She gripped his shoulders for support, feeling the solid strength of him, and thought that this was what a kiss should be like. Not the grasping desperation of Marcus's kisses, all taking and no giving, but this perfect exchange, this mutual tenderness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, even though we're already married. I want to take you to church socials and buy you flowers and make you feel cherished. You deserve that." "You already make me feel cherished," Eliza said softly, "but I wouldn't say no to flowers." He laughed, a sound of pure happiness, and kissed her again. They stood there on the porch as the stars came out overhead, wrapped in each other's arms, and Eliza felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. True to his word, Cole courted her. He brought her wildflowers picked from the prairie, their stems wrapped carefully in cloth. He escorted her to church on Sundays, his hand proud and possessive on her arm as they walked past the other townspeople. He brought her books from the ranch owner's library, knowing how much she loved to read. And he continued his evening visits, but now they ended with kisses that left Eliza dizzy and wanting more. One evening in early November, as they sat together on the porch in the cool air, Eliza broached a subject that had been on her mind. "I've been thinking about the baby," she said, her hand resting on her now prominent belly. "About what to tell him or her when they're old enough to ask." Cole considered this. "The truth seems best, not all of it, maybe not the parts that would hurt, but that I'm not their birth father, that I chose to be their daddy anyway, that I love them and you, and that's what makes us a family. You think they'll understand?" "I think children understand love better than adults do sometimes," Cole said. "And I think as long as we're honest with them, they'll be fine, better than fine, they'll be loved, and that's what matters." Eliza leaned into his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "Pretty sure I'm the lucky one," Cole murmured, kissing the top of her head. As November turned to December, Eliza had to stop teaching, her pregnancy too advanced to continue. The school board arranged for a temporary replacement until after the baby came, and Eliza found herself at loose ends, alone in the cottage during the long days. Cole asked Mr. Richardson if he could move into town to be with his wife as her time approached, and the rancher, a gruff but kind man in his 50s, agreed without hesitation. Cole moved his few possessions into the cottage, and suddenly Eliza was sharing her space with her husband in truth. It should have been awkward, but instead it felt right. Cole insisted on sleeping on a pallet on the floor, despite Eliza's protests that they could share the bed. "When we share a bed, it'll be because we're both ready for everything that comes with it," Cole said firmly. "And you're 7 months pregnant and need your rest. I'm fine on the floor." But one cold night in mid-December, Eliza woke to the sound of Cole's teeth chattering. She got up, wrapped in a shawl, and looked down at him shivering on his thin pallet. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Get up here. We can share the bed without doing anything improper. You're going to freeze to death down there." Cole hesitated, but another shiver went through him and he relented. He climbed into the bed, staying carefully on his side, but the small bed meant they were still closed together. Eliza could feel the cold radiating off him and scooted closer, sharing her warmth. "Thank you," Cole murmured, his breath ruffling her hair. They lay there in the darkness, the baby doing acrobatics between them, and Eliza felt more content than she ever had. She was warm and safe with a man who loved her, carrying a child who would grow up protected and cherished. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. "Cole," she whispered. When the baby comes, after I've recovered, I want us to be husband and wife in every way. I want to share this bed with you properly. I want more children, your children. I want all of it." She felt him tense beside her, then relax. His arm came around her, careful of her belly, pulling her back against his chest. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel obligated." "I'm sure," Eliza said, placing her hand over his where it rested on her stomach. "I love you, Cole Brennan. I want a real marriage with you." "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." They fell asleep like that, wrapped together, the baby quiet between them. 2 weeks later, on a cold December morning just before Christmas, Eliza's labor began. Cole fetched Martha Hendricks, who had helped birth half the babies in Redemption, and then was banished to the porch where he paced nervously for the next 8 hours. Inside the cottage, Eliza labored with Martha's capable help and encouragement. The pain was worse than she had imagined, waves of it that made her cry out despite her determination to be brave. But through it all, she thought of Cole waiting outside, of the life they were building together, and she found the strength to push when Martha told her to push, to breathe when told to breathe. Finally, as the sun was setting and casting long shadows across the room, Eliza's baby entered the world with a lusty cry. Martha cleaned the infant quickly and wrapped it in a soft blanket before placing it in Eliza's arms. "You've got a healthy baby boy, Mrs. Brennan," Martha said with a smile. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a good set of lungs on him. Eliza looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it almost hurt. He was perfect. He was hers. "Can Cole come in?" she asked Martha. The older woman nodded and went to the door, calling Cole inside. He came in like a man in a daze, his eyes fixed on Eliza and the bundle in her arms. He crossed to the bed slowly and sat down beside them, his expression full of wonder. "It's a boy," Eliza said softly. "Would you like to hold your son, my son?" Cole repeated, as if testing the words. He held out his arms and Eliza carefully transferred the baby to him. Cole looked down at the tiny infant cradled against his chest, and Eliza saw tears slip down his cheeks. "Hey there, little man, I'm your daddy. I've been waiting to meet you." The baby made a soft sound and Cole laughed, the sound choked with emotion. "He's perfect, Eliza, he's absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Eliza asked, watching the 2 most important people in her life together. Cole thought for a moment, still gazing at the baby. "What about Samuel Cole Brennan?" Samuel, Eliza tried the name and found she liked it. Samuel Brennan, yes, that's perfect. Martha left them alone then, promising to return in the morning to check on them. Cole carefully gave Samuel back to Eliza so the baby could nurse, then settled on the edge of the bed, watching his new family with an expression of such love that it made Eliza's breath catch. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me be part of this, for giving me a family. You gave me everything," Eliza replied, one hand on Samuel's small head as he nursed, the other reaching for Cole's hand. "You saved me when I had nothing. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You're claiming this baby as your own when you didn't have to. I'm the one who should be thanking you. Then we'll just keep thanking each other for the rest of our lives," Cole said with a smile, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "Because I plan on spending every day making sure you and Samuel know how loved you are." The next few months were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Samuel was a good baby for the most part, but he still required constant attention. Cole proved to be a natural father, getting up with Eliza for night feedings, walking the floor with Samuel when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. He returned to work at the ranch during the days, but every evening he came home to his family, and the cottage that had once felt small now felt perfectly cozy with the three of them. In March, when Samuel was 3 months old and Eliza had fully recovered from the birth, their marriage became complete in every sense. It happened naturally one evening after they had put Samuel down to sleep. They had been sitting together on the bed, talking quietly, and then Cole had kissed her, and one thing had led to another. This time, when a man touched her, it was with love and reverence. Cole was patient and gentle, making sure she felt pleasure before seeking his own. It was nothing like her experience with Marcus, which had been fumbling and selfish. This was beautiful and right, a true union of two people who loved each other. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness with Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, Cole whispered against her hair, "I love you, Mrs. Brennan." "I love you too, Mr. Brennan," Eliza whispered back, feeling complete in a way she never had before. Spring came to redemption, and with it, new beginnings. Eliza returned to teaching, with Martha Hendricks caring for Samuel during school hours. The arrangement worked well, and Eliza found she loved her students even more now that she was a mother herself. One evening in April, Cole came home with a strange expression on his face, excited and nervous at once. He waited until after supper, after Samuel had been put to bed, before he spoke. "Mr. Richardson called me into his office today," he said. "He's getting older and he's thinking about the future of the ranch. He doesn't have any children of his own and he's been impressed with my work these past years." "That's wonderful," Eliza said, not sure where this was going. "He's offered to sell me a section of the ranch," Cole continued, his voice picking up speed. 500 acres on the eastern edge. He'd carry the note himself, let me pay it off over 20 years. It's good land, Eliza. There's a creek running through it, grazing for cattle, space to build a real house. We could have our own place, our own ranch. I could build something to pass on to Samuel and whatever other children we might have. Eliza stared at him, her mind reeling. 500 acres. Cole, that's incredible. But can we afford it? With your teaching salary and what I make, plus what I could make from running cattle on our own land, yes. It'll be tight for a while, but I've run the numbers a dozen times. We can do this, Eliza. We can build our own legacy. The hope and excitement in his voice was contagious. Eliza thought about a real house, about Samuel growing up with space to run and play, about more children to fill that house with love and laughter. She thought about Cole's dreams of having something of his own, and she knew there was only one answer she could give. "Let's do it," she said, and Cole swept her into his arms, spinning her around until they were both laughing. They signed the papers the following week, and Cole threw himself into the work of building their new life. He continued working for Mr. Richardson during the day, but every spare moment was spent on their land, planning where the house would go, where the barn would be built, what sections would be best for grazing. By summer, with help from the other ranch hands and townspeople who had come to accept the Brennans as part of the community, the framework of a house was rising on a gentle slope overlooking the creek. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid and spacious, with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. They moved in just before Samuel's first birthday, and Eliza stood in her new kitchen, looking out the window at the vast expanse of their land, and felt tears of joy run down her face. She had come to redemption scared and alone, with nothing but shame and a baby in her belly. Now she had a husband who loved her, a beautiful son, a home of her own, and a future full of possibilities. Cole came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about? How different everything is from a year ago." "How grateful I am for all of it." "You know what I'm grateful for," Cole said, turning her to face him, "that you stepped off that stagecoach and into my life, best thing that ever happened to me." "Even though I came with complications," Eliza teased gently. "Especially because of that," Cole said seriously. "Those complications gave me you and Samuel and all of this. I wouldn't change a single thing." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and Eliza kissed him back with all the love in her heart. Life on the ranch was hard work, but it was good work. Cole bought a small herd of cattle and began building his stock. Eliza continued teaching during the school year, and Samuel grew into a bright, curious toddler who loved following his father around the ranch. In the fall of 1878, Eliza discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, no shame, only joy. Cole was beside himself with excitement, already planning how he would expand the house if they needed more room. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, was born in the spring of 1879. She had Cole's blue eyes and blonde hair, and he was completely besotted with her from the first moment. Samuel, now 2.5, was initially suspicious of this tiny creature that took up so much of his parents' attention. But within days, he had appointed himself her protector, always wanting to help care for his baby sister. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered as Cole proved to have a natural talent for raising cattle. Eliza taught during the school year and helped on the ranch during the summers, and their children grew strong and healthy. In 1881, they had another son, James, who had Eliza's dark hair and Cole's adventurous spirit. In 1884, their final child, a daughter named Anna, completed their family. The house that had seemed so spacious when they moved in was now filled with the noise and chaos of 4 children, and Eliza and Cole wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Samuel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved learning and helping his father with the ranch work. When he was 7, Cole and Eliza sat him down and explained as gently as they could that Cole wasn't his birth father. "I know," Samuel said simply. "I heard Mrs. Bradshaw talking about it once in town. She said I wasn't really yours." Eliza and Cole exchanged alarmed looks. "What did you say to that?" Cole asked carefully. Samuel shrugged. "I told her she was wrong. That you are my real daddy because you're the one who loves me and teaches me things and tucks me in at night." She got all huffy and walked away. Cole pulled his son into a fierce hug. "You're absolutely right, Sam. Blood doesn't make a family, love does. And I've loved you since before you were born." "I know, Papa," Samuel said, using the name he'd called Cole since he could talk. "I love you too." As the children grew, the story of how Cole and Eliza came together became family legend. The older children loved hearing about how their father had defended their mother in the street, how he had offered to marry her even though he barely knew her, how they had fallen in love despite the unusual circumstances. "It's romantic," Rose declared when she was 10, her eyes shining. "Papa rescued Mama like a knight in a story." "Your papa did more than rescue me," Eliza corrected gently. "He gave me a chance to be who I was meant to be. He treated me as an equal partner, not as someone to be saved. That's true love." Cole, listening from his chair by the fireplace, smiled at his wife. After more than a decade of marriage, she could still make his heart race with a single look. In 1887, when Samuel was 11, a letter arrived from St. Louis. It was from Marcus Whitfield's lawyer, informing them that Marcus had died of pneumonia and that he had left a small sum of money to his son, if indeed the boy is his. Eliza read the letter with Cole looking over her shoulder and felt nothing but a distant sort of pity. Marcus had been young once, full of potential, and he had thrown it all away on selfishness and pride. She thought of the man he might have been, and then she looked at Cole, at the man he actually was, and felt grateful all over again for how things had turned out. "What do you want to do?" Cole asked quietly. "I think Samuel should have the money," Eliza said slowly. "Put it aside for his future, for when he's ready to make his own way in the world, but he doesn't need to know where it came from. As far as he's concerned, you're his father in every way that matters." Cole nodded, pulling her close. "In every way that matters," he agreed. They deposited the money in the bank in Samuel's name and never spoke of it again. Marcus Whitfield had been a chapter in Eliza's life, but he was not part of her story anymore. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing of their children. The ranch prospered, and Cole's reputation as a fair and honest businessman grew. Eliza continued teaching until Rose started school, then decided to focus on her own children's education and helping Cole with the ranch's accounts. In 1890, Mr. Richardson passed away peacefully in his sleep, and in his will, he forgave the remainder of Cole's debt and left him an additional section of land. The old rancher had come to think of Cole as the son he never had, and he wanted to make sure the young family he had helped get started would be secure. "He was a good man," Cole said at the funeral, his voice thick with emotion. "He gave me the chance to build something when no one else would have. I'll never forget that." They named their newest section of land Richardson's Point in the old man's honor, and Cole made sure that the ranch's brand, which they had designed together years before, always carried a small R in the corner as a reminder. Samuel grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day ranch work to give Cole more time to focus on the business side of things. He had his mother's intelligence and his father's work ethic, and he never showed any interest in finding his birth father's family. Cole was his father, the only one he had ever known or wanted. Rose inherited her mother's love of teaching and announced at 16 that she wanted to attend a teaching college in San Antonio. It was hard for Eliza and Cole to let their daughter go so far away, but they were proud of her ambition and determination. James showed signs of becoming a natural horseman, able to calm and train even the wildest Mustang. And Anna, their youngest, had a gift for music that came from neither parent but delighted them both. In 1895, 20 years after that fateful day when Marcus had tracked Eliza to redemption, Cole and Eliza celebrated their anniversary with their children and grandchildren. Samuel had married a sweet girl from town named Emma, and they had given Eliza and Cole their first grandchild, a boy named Cole after his grandfather. As Eliza looked around at her family, at the life she and Cole had built together, she could hardly believe how far she had come. She had arrived in redemption with nothing but fear and desperation. She was leaving it, or rather, she was staying in it, surrounded by love and joy and the fruits of decades of hard work and devotion. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and the children had all gone home or to bed, Cole and Eliza sat together on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over their land. Cole's hair was gray now at the temples, and Eliza's dark locks were streaked with silver, but when he took her hand, she felt the same flutter in her stomach that she had felt 20 years ago. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Taking me on with all my baggage. You could have had an easier life." Cole turned to look at her, his blue eyes still as clear and honest as they had been when he was 26. Not for one single second. You and our children, our grandchildren, this life we've built together, it's everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed of having. I meant what I said that day, Eliza. You were mine and that was enough. It will always be enough." Eliza leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him that had never wavered in 20 years. "I love you, Cole Brennan, today, tomorrow, and for all the years we have left. And I love you, Eliza Brennan, forever and always." They sat there as the stars came out, hands clasped, hearts joined, surrounded by the legacy of their love. The little girl in St. Louis who had made a mistake and the cowboy who had offered her a second chance had become so much more than either of them had imagined possible. They had become partners, lovers, best friends, and the foundation of a family that would continue for generations. The Wild West was full of stories of outlaws and gunfights, of gold rushes and cattle drives. But it was also full of quieter stories, of people who found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from broken pieces. Cole and Eliza's story was one of those, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the transformative nature of true love. Years later, when their grandchildren asked how they fell in love, Cole would smile and say, "Your grandmother needed help and I had a good feeling about her. Turns out my feeling was right." And Eliza would add, "Your grandfather saw me at my worst moment and chose to see the best in me." That's the kind of man he is. That's the kind of love that lasts. But between them, in the quiet moments when they were alone, they remembered that day in redemption when everything changed. They remembered the fear and the courage, the offer made and accepted, the slow building of trust that became love that became a lifetime. When Cole passed away peacefully in 1912 at the age of 62, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, Eliza held his hand and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for every single day." And though he couldn't speak by then, he squeezed her hand 3 times, their private signal that meant "I love you," and she knew he heard her. Eliza lived another 8 years, long enough to see the ranch continue to thrive under Samuel's management, to see Rose become a principal at her own school, to meet great-grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of love and hard work that she and Cole had established. She spent her final years in the ranch house they had built together, surrounded by family and memories. On her last day, as she lay in the bed she had shared with Cole for so many years, Samuel sat beside her holding her hand. "Tell me again," he said softly, "about the day you and Papa got married." Eliza smiled, her eyes distant with memory. "I was scared and alone, and your papa, he just stepped up and offered me everything without asking for anything in return. He said I was his and that was enough." And you know what? It was more than enough. It was everything. "He saved you," Samuel said. "No," Eliza corrected gently, just as she always had. "We saved each other. That's what love does. It saves us from ourselves, from our fears, from our past. It gives us a future worth living." She closed her eyes then and slipped away peacefully, joining Cole in whatever came after. But their story didn't end there. It lived on in their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. It lived on in the ranch that still bore the Brennan name, in the teaching methods that Rose had learned from her mother and passed on to her own students, in the values of kindness and courage and commitment that every member of the family carried forward. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set over the Texas plains in shades of gold and crimson, people swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old Brennan ranch house, hands clasped, heads together, still in love after all these years. Because some love stories don't end. They just continue on, echoing through time, reminding everyone who hears them that it's never too late for second chances, that broken things can be mended, and that the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings. The story of Cole and Eliza Brennan became legend in redemption, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looked like. Not the passionate, fleeting kind that burned hot and fast, but the steady, enduring kind that grew stronger with each passing year. The kind of love that chose to see the best in people, that offered help without expecting anything in return, that built families and legacies and lives worth living. It was the kind of love that the Wild West was built on, really. The kind that took rough, broken people and raw, unforgiving land and made something beautiful from it all. The kind that understood that what mattered wasn't where you came from or what mistakes you had made, but what you chose to do with the chances you were given. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy Cole and Eliza left behind. Not the ranch, not the money, not even the children and grandchildren who bore their names. It was the knowledge that love, real love, was always worth the risk. That extending kindness to someone in need could change not just their life, but your own. That family was made not by blood, but by choice and commitment and the daily decision to show up for each other, no matter what. The Wild West was a hard place, unforgiving and dangerous. But it was also a place where people could reinvent themselves, where the past didn't have to define the future, where a disgraced schoolteacher and a working cowboy could meet on a dusty street and build an empire of love. That was the real story of the West, the one that didn't always make it into the history books, but was no less important for it. It was the story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things through the simple act of loving each other well. And Cole and Eliza's story, which began with a warning and a promise, proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. That sometimes the person you need most walks into your life at exactly the right moment, even if you don't realize it at the time. And that the greatest adventures aren't always about conquering new territories or striking it rich, but about building a life with someone you love and creating a legacy that will outlast you both. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their legacy secure. And in a world that often seemed too hard and too cruel, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.